Welcome to Tribecast with Simon. Before starting, a huge shout out to Browser Stack, our exclusive sponsor for all our community events and premier sponsor for conferences. Apart from that, about the speaker today, Simon. Simon will be taking the session today. He's the head of quality engineer at EasyJet. I'll just call up Simon here at the stage right now. Hi, Simon.
Hello. Hi,
Yeah,
everyone.
perfect. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Yeah, stage is all yours, Simon.
Brilliant. Thank you. So just a bit about me. So I am, as was said, I'm the head of QE at EasyJet. That's my wife and my two boys, 9 and 6. That's their ages, not their names. I'm lead test include on Twitter, and my website is simon-prior.uk. I recently won the European Software Testing Awards Test Manager of the Year. Actually, it was 2 years ago now. And actually, this year we've got my team are up for 3 awards at the European Testing Awards this year. So very exciting to try and paint the awards orange this November. I won that for being Test Manager of the Year, but for a big part of my community outreach through other things I do, such as I'm one of the co-hosts of the Testing Peers podcast, complete with merch today as well. So we started this in May 2020. It's a podcast all about testing and leadership. We've just reached 40,000 downloads, and we've just released our 92nd episode. So it's been good fun. Any topic from testing and leadership is usually on in the chance of being talked about. So feel free to reach out to us and listen to the podcast if you're interested. I'm also an advocate for neurodiversity. So there's a high level of neurodivergence in my family. So I do a lot to advocate for the workplaces to be more neurodiverse friendly. So looking at how we make interview processes and hiring and onboarding and just being in the workplace easier for those with autism, ADHD, and other neurodivergent conditions. Again, if you want to reach out and talk about that, I could talk for hours about how we can support each other in that space. A conference speaker. So this is probably about the 10th time I've given this talk at various conferences and events. So hopefully there'll be some of you have not heard it before, but I'm sure some of you will have seen it at some point. And a recent thing, one of the things I'm really passionate about now as I grow in my career into more senior leadership is I'm really passionate about mentoring and coaching others. So I have set up a profile on Mentor Cruise where you can offer your services as a mentor to mentees. And I've put it on there to help people with testing, with leadership, with building teams. Just reach out if you're interested and we can talk about what options there are there. So I'm going to take you on a little journey. This story starts back in 2020. I joined EasyJet on January the 2nd, 2020. Obviously, the pandemic hit in March that year, and we were locked down. And for the airline industry, that was catastrophic. You know, all planes were grounded. No flying was happening. We were losing money hand over fist, and we had to make changes to the way we were set up as a company. So the testing function was disbanded. So there was all the testers that were remaining were dispersed into individual technology functions. There was no central QA function, and the test managers were spread out across that group. And as part of that process, two of the test managers, or one of the test managers, was let go at that point. And as they left the business, they made a comment to me that basically nothing that I do to try and solve the problems around how we were testing could be solved because of the wider culture problems within EasyJet. Testing can be improved, but all we can do, it will only ever be the tip of the iceberg. So I took that as a personal challenge. I was going to do my best to try and change the way we did things at EasyJet from a testing and quality perspective. So I started using this term culture of quality. We wanted to build a culture of quality across EasyJet. It wasn't just about doing testing, it was about building quality in, having the continuous testing cycle, building things into from the start. So I asked the question, what is a culture of quality? And I spoke to the team, we worked it through, and we came up with a conclusion that a culture of quality is a shared cross-team focus of delivering high-quality software that meets our users' needs, and all of our practices internal support that. So that's not just talking about testing in isolation. That's looking at what are we doing to deliver the software to the users. How are we ensuring that it meets their needs? Not that it's just functional. It's not about correctness, or not only about correctness. It's about how does it meet what the user needs. The example I always give is there's a if you imagine two apps that do the same functional thing, that for you, let's say they're a ticket booking application. One is very well used, but has loads of bugs in it. The other one does everything perfectly, but it's got really bad user experience and no one uses it. You could say, if you're looking at just pure correctness, the second one is the higher quality, but equally, the first one, more customers are satisfied by it. It's got more throughput. It's got more users. You could say that one is a higher quality as well. And this is the idea of quality isn't just about correctness. It's about the overall experience for the users and the people that are using the software, full stop. So I created this model around how we grow a culture. And I'll talk you through this as we go through the deck. But it starts by setting the vision, setting the narrative, setting the strategy of where we want to go with quality. You then have to work at engaging the team that you're working with. So this is the test team, the test managers, the people you're working closely with, and help them buy into this vision of quality. Once they've all bought into it, it's then really key to start sharing that passion with the wider business and shouting about successes within testing. It might be, but my QA team are siloed. No one in the business really cares about what we do. We just do the testing. Well, this is where it needs to change. You need to start shouting about the successes you're having, and whether that's automation, whether that's you've built exploratory testing in, you've changed the dynamics of where testing fits in the cycle. Anything that's a success, we should start shouting about. By shouting about the passion with the wider business, you then start building relationships with those teams that don't usually care about testing. People in the finance teams, the marketing teams, the HR teams, where suddenly they see what testing can do for their areas, especially in a company where, like EasyJet, we don't just we don't just test the software that's for the airline. We test the software for the HR and marketing and finance departments as well. So the corporate software, that they're part of that picture. So therefore, building those relationships is really key. And by doing that, you then find the allies that can be the ones that shout about it for you. And once you've built those allies, you'll then find it a lot easier to drive process improvements through and get the org moving closer to that vision that you had. And then the key thing is this is a cycle. So you just keep going around it, and you spend time retrospectively looking over how it's gone, sending out checks to the team to make sure that everyone's on board with it, and just continue that movement. So let's start by how we define your quality narrative. And another question for you, again, it'd be great to hear some of these answers in the chat. So please put your answers in there. But what are some of the common misconceptions around QA or testing? Please take your time to just put them in the chat, and we'll talk them through. But these are some of the ones that I call out. We test everything. This is fundamentally never possible. So we should stop accepting that phrase of we're testing everything. We just write and execute test cases. I think hopefully by the end of this presentation, if you weren't already in the mindset that we do a lot more, hopefully you'll be aware that we can do a lot more than just that. We want to break the software. I would say actually the last thing we want to do is break it. We want to prove that it's working. And actually a happy tester is someone that's proved it's working correctly, and as far as you can see, it's going to be good for the customer. Our role is just to find defects. I think it's part of our role, but I definitely don't think it's our full role. And then the one that really bugs me is this, us being solely responsible for quality. There is so much importance on the whole team approach to quality. Everyone needs to be aware of what quality is. Everyone needs to be fighting towards it. And of course, I've put a picture of the gatekeeper here as well, which hopefully is an old old style of testing and QA, having the gatekeeper of production. That means nothing gets into production until QA have signed off on it. That's, it's still, I know it's still prevalent in some places, but hopefully as an industry you're moving more to a fact that testing and quality QA is about providing information to stakeholders to make a decision, not about being that blocker that stops things going live. So what makes a quality narrative? The narrative is really about how quality is measured and perceived within your company. So this is about being able to ask people, stakeholders of the company, key people, what does quality mean to them? So it's about understanding where you are now and then where you want to be. So you would have a as is and to be type focus and building to help build towards that right culture. And the type of questions you might ask would be, who owns quality? How is testing done? And what value does that testing provide? And then once you've identified what those questions are, then think about what your utopian view is. Where do you want to get to? What's the ultimate vision? How do you want testing and quality to be perceived within your organization? Can you identify tangible ways for that value to be visible? So it's not just about, oh, great, all my testing is passing. What does that mean? Can you put that in a language that the business will understand? From an airline perspective, can you change your narrative to be talking more about revenue per seat on flights? So we can help increase that or protect that revenue of £5 per seat per flight that's being spent by our customers by making sure our systems are tested to the right level. It's changing the dynamics of what you speak about, and it's putting it in a language that the business will understand. And then, is quality seen at the level it needs to be? So this is the example for EasyJet that I put together at the time. So when I joined in 2020, QA was still very much in a place where it was seen as gatekeepers of production. We had very different ways of approaches in different teams. We had a couple of teams in our digital space that were very agile. They followed Scrum processes. They had testers as part of those teams, and they did a constant iterative approach where they reviewed and had retrospectives on what they delivered and continued on that process and delivered vast amounts of deliveries. Then on the other side, we had teams in our other spaces of the organization, which were still very much in a waterfall model where the only testing was manual. It was only done towards the end of a cycle, and the whole process was very slow and laborious. Automation was very minimal, and major issues were rarely found, and we had lots of production issues within our systems. This is what we're aiming for. So we're not there yet. We're on this journey, but we're not there yet. That we're seen as advocates of quality. That we're people engage us early. That we're there at the start of a process or a project to define what quality looks like and how we build it into the solution. We define standards across all areas that are aligned to some key principles, and we have an automation first approach. Doesn't mean we automate everything, but one of the first discussions we have when you start a project is, okay, what can we automate here? What's the focus of automation? Is it going to be to generate test data? Is it going to be we're going to look at the key user journeys and we'll automate that? Or is it just a case of we're going to write all our tests, but then we're going to automate them rather than running them manually, and then we'll complement it by exploratory testing? It's a different mindset rather than us running all the tests, doing the first release as a manual test release, and then writing the automation afterwards. It's definitely a case of if we automate first, it will make the process quicker longer term. So that was the narrative, and this is what we put in place, and this is how we are getting there. We've made some successes, which I'll talk through, but there's still further to go on the journey. So behind every team, there needs to be a leader that's willing to step up and put their head above the parapet and start challenging the status quo. And that, in this case, was myself. I started working with my team, showed my passion, and earned their trust. I was very keen to share, hey, there's a blog here you should read, or I'll go and watch this talk, or hey, Test Tribe have got a webcast on this week. You should go and watch that one. Just simple pointers for the team. But At the point that I joined, people hadn't heard of a lot of the test communities. You mentioned Ministry of Testing, and no one knew what Ministry of Testing was. You talk about conferences, no one had been to conferences. It was just very, very insular in the way they were working, and they thought the way they were doing it was the only way they could do it. So once we'd worked out, got their passion together, we started collaboratively working on some principles that we all truly believed in, that we could set the tone for the organization and start working from these principles. And these are the principles that we came up with at the time. And I have Suman Bala to thank for the design. She was my lead QE architect for the last 2 years, and she was really key in putting this together. But we worked together on the details. So everything points to this culture of quality. So from automating the right things. So it's not automating everything, it's working out where the ROI makes sense to do automation, and automating there, not just blindly saying we're going to automate all our manual tests and we're going to build this regression pack with 4,000 test cases that's going to be run every time we run it. Well, what's the value in that? Does every test need to be automated? It's looking at the right tests. We're going to build testability as a foundation. So this is a conversation that starts early. We look at requirements, we look at designs, we have testability assessments of those requirements and the designs to assess where the requirements are testable, where the design has taken testability into account, to ensure that we've got a good foundation to start building the right testing solution out from. We're looking at continuous improvement. We never stand still. We're always looking for ways to improve what we're doing. We will regularly have retrospectives on our testing within a team or within a wider technology group to go, right, this is what we've done from a testing perspective in this area. Could we transfer that and look at it over here as well? And constantly looking at ways to improve. We are more user and data driven. So we now look at analytics when we're building our testing, especially for things where there's customer facing applications like the website. One of our main tests that we had on the website for booking tickets for the flight was a family of 4. When we looked at the analytics, we found that 50% of our customers were single travelers. So therefore, it might sound very minimal, but we changed our key test case to be that single traveler. And then we're always looking at risk. Risk-based testing is a massive part of everything we do. We have risk-based testing metrics that look at weighted approaches, and we complement that risk-based testing with exploratory testing. And again, this is some areas this is more embedded in than others. We also started building out this quality engineering view of where we can provide value at every stage of the life cycle. And again, this is a journey that we're building out. This is a part of our strategy that we've shared, and we're starting to pick off the different areas in different teams that we can make a difference, whether that be testing the idea in the discovery phase, or looking at the test strategy and building out the assumptions and the planning, building out the testability assessment and traceability, and looking at our system quality characteristics, which is what we call non-functionals. Building out the test stories and features, looking at the automation in the pipeline, testing in production, having observability in place, and then looking at how we learn from what we've done, and building that all around with the right metrics. And the metrics is a big journey we're on at the moment to try and get the right ones. We built that foundation. We've got that narrative and that view and the vision and the principles. We then start empowering and growing the team. So the first thing I started to do was build this safe to fail environment. Hey, yeah, go and try that new tool out. See if it works. If it doesn't work, great. We'll shelve that, but we'll take your learnings and we'll look at what we need to do for the next one. Giving people that time to try things, even if they're not sure it's going to work, gives people confidence in what they're learning, and they get to explore things further. And it gives them that sense of well-being as well, that they're doing something new rather than doing the same mundane thing day in, day out. Started encouraging others to speak up and talk about testing. So whether it be in a team meeting where someone from the team needed to step up and talk about testing to a wider group, it wouldn't always be me. Or whether it be a testing all hands meeting where I'd randomly select someone, and then the following week, using the TestSphere card deck, we'd pick a card and say, right, go and prepare a 5-minute presentation on exploratory testing or on boundary value analysis, come back and just talk to us about it for 5 minutes and just give them chance to do that public speaking in a small arena, would start to build up their confidence that they could then step up in a team meeting where someone's challenging why the testing's taking so long or why this defect's important, that it isn't always me that's the one that steps up and goes, well, actually, this is because of X, Y, and Z. Someone else can do that bit because they've got confidence that I've got their back and they're able to step forward. We started creating testing career paths. So when I joined EasyJet, all there was tester and test manager. And the natural progression was you became a good tester and then you became a test manager at a later point. I've tried to break that because not everyone makes a good manager. Not everyone is able to lead a team of people in the same way that they were able to do really good testing. So we started looking at breaking that career path out. There was tester, there's senior tester, we've got test architects or QE architects as they're now called. We've got automation roles, we've got a test environments manager role, and then we've got the management and leadership path as well. So we've started building out a bit more of a matrix of roles so that people don't feel like they've only got a single track they can go down. I made hires that disrupted the norm. I wasn't just looking for a 9-to-5 tester that wasn't impacted by the community, that didn't do anything outside the norm. I wanted people that were immersed in the passion of testing. So I made some hires that started challenging everything we did internally, whether that be through looking at how we do automation or looking at where we put exploratory testing or looking at team dynamics and team setups. And well, no, we shouldn't be doing all these sprints and then a 4-week end-to-end regression cycle. That should be embedded in the sprint process, and just getting people from the outside to come in with their industry knowledge to start changing the way we do things. And that's still happening now. We're still bringing more and more people in that have got a different view on how we do testing. One of the key roles we brought in was the first test architect. And for me, this role is very different in different places. But for me, the test architect is effectively someone that coaches quality across the organization. So they might be involved in helping shape automation and testing best practices, but they're not going to be hands-on coding the automation. They focus on the transformation roadmap. So how do we get from being that test team that only gets involved at the end to being involved at every step along the cycle? They help set the vision, the strategy. They advocate for those principles that we've built that I mentioned earlier. They mentor and coach the wider teams, not just the testers, but even the technology teams, the developers, the BAs, the PMs, on how testing fits and quality and why it's important. And then they're there alongside me, providing that thought leadership for technology within the testing space and being that voice of, hey, we can change this. And overall, in the teams they're put in, they are the glue that keeps that team going from a testing perspective, looking at how we get from A to Z rather than just looking at testing A and B. It's really looking at that bigger picture. We managed this last year to get our name changed as well from quality assurance to quality engineering. And it's actually started to make a real difference in how we're perceived within the organization. No longer are we seen as the team that only gets involved at the end, but we are seen as we're there for the whole life cycle. And the quality engineers and the QE architects and the QE managers that we have in place now are able to really drive that vision forward. So we got the team engaged and we've got things changed and we've changed our name. Then we had to start engaging and inspiring the wider team. So we built the internal community practice. We called it the Test Guild, the EasyJet Test Guild, and we started having external speakers come in and do really good sessions with the teams on a variety of topics to really get people engaged. And what we did, we invited everybody along, not just the test teams. We invited the whole of IT, which is 400 plus people. And we had good turnouts to start with. We had 100, 150 people, that only 25 of those were testers. So we got a real mix of people across the org, and they started to come and learn about exploratory testing, or how we talk about quality to leadership, or how we do better security testing, all these kind of, topics that we as a testing community take for granted, but a wider organization's like, wow, this stuff, these testers, we thought they only did they write a few manual test scripts and executed them. So we invited these speakers to come in. We also set up, working with Ministry of Testing, we've got pro membership for across the testing team. And it isn't just about giving them pro membership and just leaving them to it. We are starting to try, and we've done one draft of these where every individual gets a learning pathway. So we talk about them, what they're really interested in, and then we go away, and either myself or the managers that look after these people will trawl through the Ministry of Testing library to find a series of conference talks or videos or podcasts or blogs to read related to that topic, whether it be about risk or about leadership or about automation, particular tooling. If they've got a particular skill they want to learn, here's a pathway of courses you should make your way through and document what you've learned from each one, and try and get people engaged in what the wider community has to offer. I led by example. I'm here talking through this today. I've done this several times out other places. I've got other people in my team that are active community speakers, podcasters, bloggers, active on LinkedIn, that really helps share that message of, hey, we've got great people here at EasyJet. We want to share what we know with others and try and help improve the wider community. We also set up a series of specialist communities within EasyJet. So again, around testing, but not tied just to testers to join. And we had 5 of these that we set up originally. There was the Performance Guild, which talked all about how we could improve our performance testing, what we look for in performance testing. We'd look at capacity, we'd look at stress testing, everything that we take as standard when building performance. But we've got a really good performance partner called Capacitas who do a lot of our performance testing and capacity assurance across our production environments. They joined this group and they've helped us really internally learn how to do effective performance testing. We've got our Accessibility Guild, again, not just tied to the testing teams, but the wider web teams and even other teams in the business where there's an accessibility need. We had one employee from the legal team who was blind, who wanted to join and talk to us about their experiences and how we could then help test systems to ensure that the systems they were using on a day-to-day basis were able to be used effectively. So this is not just about looking at screen readers. This was looking at accessibility as a whole and working out how we can do more testing around those areas. Security Guild, again, working with InfoSec to try and build the better practice around security and learn more about security testing at all levels. At the moment, in a lot of places, pen testing is the only aspect of testing, security testing that's done. This is about bringing security testing left and making the teams more responsible for it, whether it be authentication testing or other levels of basic security testing that the team could be doing rather than relying on InfoSec to do everything. And then the final one was around automation. Is that the final one? No, there's one more. Automation testing. So looking at, rather than just automating regression packs, building automation out across the board, whether it be process automation, whether it be test automation, test data generation, all these different aspects, looking at the right tooling, the right strategy across the board to build out the right picture. And trying to standardize it as much as possible so we don't have 50 different tools across our estate, that where possible we use the same standard tools that we've built in other areas. And then the final one was the Exploratory Testing Guild. And this was all about learning how to do better exploratory testing, looking at charters, looking at session-based testing, bringing people from wider than just the testing team in to try and immerse themselves in how to do good exploratory testing. We ran a couple of sessions where we invited senior leaders into exploratory testing, and we exploratory tested our own booking website, and they found some defects because they hadn't thought about things in such an intricate way before, and we were able to show them the value of thinking differently and not just following the script. We then also started the test party. So this was a Friday afternoon activity. We've stopped it recently. We're going to start it up again in the new year, where we would either watch a talk together from either Ministry of Testing or online, and we'd then discuss it and whiteboard out the options, or we would exploratory test the system within the estate. As a group, we'd mob test it. we'd sit there as a group, discuss our ideas, and then we'd go away and try and exploratory test it. All done through Zoom or through Teams, because most of Fridays, hardly anyone's in the office. Friday's usually a day that everyone's at home. So we'd remotely log into Teams, split into little groups within Teams, and then exploratory test particular aspects, and then come back together and talk about our findings. And I say we invited across the company all the IT leaders, and several of them came to several sessions. At other times, we've actually watched talks and whiteboarded out the actions. So as you see here, 3 talks: Erica Chestnut, Jenny Bramble, Rob Meany. There's been many others as well, where we've watched the talks, and then we've whiteboarded out things we can do and things we could take away as actions to improve within our own areas. And they're all really good learning opportunities. It got the team in a more relaxed mindset to think about testing and then take it back into their day job on a day-to-day basis. And it really helped us change the perception of what we do. We had several comments from senior leaders going, well, I didn't realize this is what you testers could do. I honestly thought you just wrote tests and executed them. I didn't realize there was so much more you could help with. And it's helped get us in earlier in the cycles. So then about using that momentum from the test party and the guilds and the internal community to start finding every opportunity to speak about quality. So we'd run lunch and learn sessions with the wider organization to talk through our strategy or to talk through the way we're working. We'd be invited along to IT team meetings to discuss testing as one of the guest speakers for the wider IT meetings. We'd run training sessions to all of the engineering teams on testing to try and improve not just how we did testing, but how some of the developers or some of the analysts in other areas could do their own testing, and especially around UAT and the business teams. We then worked hard to find our allies. In certain areas, we'd find someone in business change would be a real advocate for what we're doing, or a particular PM who had a good experience of us on one project would then talk about, hey, we need to engage Simon and his team on this project because they didn't spend all their testing budget. And in fact, they saved money for us because they found defects earlier rather than leaving them to production. So we actively search out the voices who seemed a little bit interested in what we did and would come along to our sessions, even if they weren't working within the testing group. We'd then convince them and they'd become, allies for us. We'd ply them with testing stickers, or we've got an EasyJet sticker that we give out with quality engineering principles on. Just something simple to signify, hey, I support the QE team. That then gives people a heads up because it's someone outside the QE team that's got the EasyJet QE sticker on his laptop or her laptop, and it just helps to start those conversations in a wider landscape. And the more people we got that believed in our message, the better chance it stood of being heard overall. And then once we got all these processes in, all these pieces in place, we could then more easily make test process improvements. So we'd collaborate as a group on the kind of things that we could improve, whether that be improving the way we wrote test cases, improving Jira workflows, how-to guides on how to do certain amounts of testing, or whether it was actually writing automation. So we demonstrate these to the business on how these ideas would help improve quality. We've made big changes in automation. We've got dashboards in Newman and with Postman. We've built a new test automation suite that's reduced our testing time down from 17 days to 4 minutes on one of our disruption management systems. We've put testability reviews in place so that every project now has this review in place where the requirements are assessed for testability, and that's reducing the time it takes to get the testing done because we've already got a good understanding of what we need to test earlier on. And it's also found defects 3-4 months earlier in waterfall projects because the review phase of the requirements is done a lot earlier, and we're able to find those challenges at that point and eliminate them, and then we've had a smoother run later on. We've brought in exploratory testing. We've put risk-based testing as an approach that people start to understand what it means and why we do it. And then as part of putting all these things in place, we then start getting feedback and review from others. So we'd send out pulse surveys to key people across the business to check how they found the interaction with us. Did it work well for them? We'd work through any improvements that were suggested, and that might mean, if someone raised something to me that they were unsure about, I'd grab a coffee with them next time I was in the office, and we'd sit and work it through, and I'd try and understand their way of thinking, and then I'd try and coach them on what we were trying to do. But equally, if what they were saying had genuine backing, then I would take that away and work with the team to find out how we can improve it. The key message from all of this is changing the culture isn't easy. Changing the dynamics of how a team works is not easy. A lot of people are set in their mindset of, well, this is the way I've always worked. It really is a case of being ready for that journey, being prepared to challenge, being prepared to push back on things. So the road will not be easy. You have to look at how you can continuously improve, but don't take off on too much at once. Don't try and boil the ocean. Pick one thing at a time that you want to try and improve. There will be patches where you feel frustrated that things aren't moving quick enough, but equally you have to change something and then let it bed in for a while to actually see the benefit of whether it's working, and take action if it's not, course correct and move forward. And a culture doesn't have a definitive end. So although you've got an end goal, you may find that your path changes along the way. You may find that actually you end up going in a slightly different direction, but that might be okay for the business. That might be okay for you as a team. As long as it's making improvements and you're delivering value, then don't be afraid that your path may change at some point. So in summary, the longest journeys will start with the first step. Don't be afraid to over communicate. Send out newsletters, do everything you can to really sell the value of QE and quality. Share successes, no matter how small they are. Collaborate. Promote the importance of quality across the board. And most importantly, have fun. And that's all I have. So I will stop sharing. And that's all I had. So I don't know if there's any questions.
Hi, Simon.
Oh,
Yeah, we have two questions. First question is, can you describe how you do testability assessments?
yeah. Okay. So, I mean, the simplest way we do it is we have, so we take the requirements and we build a form that puts all the requirements in, and we ask ourselves a simple question: with the information that's given in the requirement, can we identify a test scenario? If the answer is no, then there's not enough information there, or there's something missing. That's we need to go back and talk to the BA about that, or the PM about that. If it's yes, and we can suggest a sample a scenario for that, that's the starting point for saying yes, we feel that requirement is testable. So the first stage is that you might find that after you've gone through the 300 requirements, that 60% of them are testable. We then take the 40% back to the BA and say, we need some more help on these. Can we clarify this? Can we identify that? That might involve bringing developers or SMEs into the room to discuss those requirements in more detail, to iron out what they mean, and then hopefully we'll all come to agreement that it needed changing, and we make it clear what the requirement should say. So that's the first stage of the assessment. And then with the design, we do something similar. We look at the design, we work out how we could test it by drawing out the system process that we would follow compared to what the design suggests, and identify where there's differences.
Thanks for the answer. Next question is, what are the risk-based you factors you base your testing on?
So one will be the value, the importance to business of that particular function or the feature or the product. So there may be particular aspects of the system that are particularly risky because of the nature of the product. So let's say an operational system where we're looking at weighting of, the balance and weighting of the aircrafts. There may be particular areas of that system that are high risk. So therefore we would focus more of our testing on those areas. And we may also look at defect history, defect clusters. How do we identify that this is a key area? It may be that the system's a new system, and therefore we look at, is it a commercial system? So therefore anything that's related to generating revenue would be of higher focus than simple things like login or registration or name, and that's still important. We still need to test those, but the focus would be on the systems that are absolutely critical to generate the revenue. So it's looking at each system in isolation, working out what the key purpose of each area is, what the history is as far as defects, and the complexity as well is another area. So how complex is that part of the system that you're working with? How many interactions does it have with other systems? And building up those pictures of where the risks are. And we use the risk storming activity as well to help identify those key areas.
Perfect. Next question is how did you overcome any resistance of senior stakeholders?
It's a good question. It's a challenge, but you have to be persistent and you have to show evidence of what you could do to improve and how it's going to happen and why it's going to happen. And if you can relate it back to cost saving, that's always a plus. If you can prove that it's going to generate revenue equally, that's also a plus. But you have to come with proof that it's going to work. You can't go, oh, I think if I do this, it might change this over here. So to start with, the testability assessment, we ran a trial before we spoke to senior leadership to say, look, actually, if we run this project with a testability assessment, we'll reduce the testing time by 2 weeks. Well, until you've proven that, you can't go and say that. So we did it out for one project, and we reduced the testing time by, I think it was 4 or 5 days overall, because the testing was a lot smoother. There was not as many defects found because we'd identified a lot of them in the requirements and worked it through. So then we tried it on a bigger scale project, and we actually ended up reducing the testing time down by 2 to 3 weeks because we'd worked it through. We'd found a lot of things in the requirements. There was like 600-700 requirements to work through, and we'd worked it all through as a team, doing regular workshops on a portion of them, working out the testability, having those conversations. Found a lot of defects early on, and then when it went into delivery phase and testing phase later on, a lot less defects were found, and the system went live with very minimal noise once it went live in production. So we proved the value in that respect, but also we were 2 weeks ahead of schedule but when we got to the finish.
Perfect. Next question is, what is the best time to start automation in SDLC?
You should be thinking about it when requirements are being written. You should be looking at designing your automation, thinking about your automation at the same time that a solution design is being created or some architecture review is happening at the start of a project. And obviously it depends. If you're in an agile world, you'll have to build it into your sprint backlog as a epic alongside the requirements, the user stories, but build it in at the same time. Don't do it a sprint or two later. Make sure you're automating as part of the definition of done and doing it straight away. It should be there at the start as part of the requirements for the project. The automation to test this will be done alongside it.
What activities can be done in test party?
Whatever you like, as long as it's testing related. We've done exploratory testing of any system within our estate as a group. We've watched talks. We've done risk storming sessions. We've had lean coffees where we just talked about testing process within EasyJet or how we could improve things. Use the time to focus as a team collectively to do something slightly more fun, but still work related as far as the testing side. And yeah, just as long as you're not all sat watching the sport on the telly instead of doing that and talking about that, as long as there's some testing relation to it, then yeah, go ahead.
I will, Simon. Before the session, I told you about the live testing event which happens in the
Yeah,
community, and this is something similar which we do.
that's
Perfect.
exactly the kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Next question is, as part of the collaboration cross-functional agile team, how you got involved the developers into the functional test automation practice, or is the automation in silos with only independent test automation team doing it?
No, in an ideal world, testing automation should be built as part of the delivery teams, but you'd have testing people embedded to support with that. So if the development team are not up to the point where they're doing all their own testing, then definitely we need to embed someone from the wider test group. So it might be that I have a central automation team at the moment where we embed people from that central automation team into projects, and they then work and they develop the automation alongside the team that are developing the code or working on the integrations. We have a lot of SaaS products that we bring into EasyJet as part of our estate. There's very limited teams that actually do their in-house development. A lot of it is SaaS vendor integrations. So it's a very different model in that respect, but we build automation while they're providing their solution to make sure that when we drop it into our estate, it's ready to go. So it's done as part of that team, not as a separate activity.
Next question is, what would you suggest to a tester to work on in terms of growth, specifically in terms of tough environment at the workplace?
I would say focus on your passion, focus on your communication, and look at how you can sell testing. So it's part of the job as a tester in the modern world is actually the art of selling it, because there's always a challenge on cost. We can reduce testing down by 2 weeks. We need to hit our project budget. We need to hit the deadline. You have to be able to stand up and sell why we need to do this testing, what the value is, what quality is to that business. And that, for me, if you can show that and you can be passionate about why testing is important, that will really help you in your growth, and give you that recognition from senior leadership, because they'll see you standing up and speaking out about testing. Technical skills is great as well. Don't dismiss the fact that you need to learn how to do good testing. You don't have to go down the automation route. There is other ways into more advanced roles in testing, but learning those technical skills is never a bad thing as well.
Yeah, like we are having one course on how you can sell your bug. The course is by Rahul Parwal. It's on the Thrive at School. I'll request everyone to do check it out. How you are able to show the ROI of automation in your domain, where there are continuous changes getting into high maintenance to also focus.
I think sharing ROI, it is very context specific for your own domain. Being able to prove to start with that, if we put this automation in place, then we can reduce the end of sprint testing down from X amount of days to X amount of minutes. You can always then calculate that based on how many people you had working on it. You can calculate an ROI from a cost perspective, but it's also looking at how do you then scale that up for, right, we're going to do 5 releases this year, and rather than it taking 3 weeks to test, we're going to do the testing in a day. Then you can calculate how much you've saved on that perspective. And I think cost saving, working for a low budget airline, cost saving is quite key. So that's always a big factor. Other areas might not be as focused on cost saving. They might be more on cost generation, or how we're, customer satisfaction scores and how this could improve the customer satisfaction within the domain. So think about what the key business objectives are within your context and try and relate the automation back to that in some form, if that's possible.
In summary, like you need to get the feedback from the customers and then you can do the changes.
Yeah.
Perfect. The final question is, what is the next step in improvement in QA and testing at EasyJet?
Thank you, Andrew, for that one. We are on a journey still to sell testing at the right level. So selling upwards the value of why we're doing testing, why it costs this much, what the value of the automation is. That's a big part of it. One of the biggest challenges we have is our test environments across EasyJet, because of the nature of the business with the SaaS products that are being integrated into our estate. Our environments are very complex. So one of my big challenges this next year is building an org-wide environment strategy, and then starting to move the teams towards this more simple promotional model within the estate. That baselining our automation, getting to a point we've got dashboards that can give senior leadership a very quick view of where we are is our next steps, and just building out the passion further. rejuvenating the test party on a Friday afternoon and getting people involved in that community again.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Simon, for taking out time. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.